Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and guess what? We've got another retro game clone console to take a look at, but this one's actually a little different than the last few that we've seen because all of those played Nintendo games, the old 8-bit games. This one does that, but it also does the Super Nintendo also just by flicking the switch down to the SNES. So if you have a bunch of these old game cartridges kicking around and you want to play them again, you can use this thing and play both systems in one device on your HD television. We're going to be taking a closer look at this in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, this did come in free of charge from a company called Old Skool. They're the ones who made this thing. All the opinions, though, you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for what you're about to see, and no one has reviewed this content before I uploaded it to YouTube. So let's get into this and see what it can do. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This costs $70 as configured, and remember, it comes with no games. You've got to bring your own original SNES and NES cartridges in order to play any games on this. So if you don't have those old carts kicking around, you're not going to have too much fun with this thing. I did try some flash cartridges that allow you to load up little SD cards full of ROMs that you can pop into an old Nintendo or Super Nintendo. None of the popular flash cartridges worked on this one either. So if you don't have a real Nintendo cartridge here, you're going to be out of luck. Now, it does come with two controllers. You get a SNES style controller here along with an NES style controller, and you can also use the originals because the connectors here on the front are identical to the Super Nintendo and the NES respectively. The controllers that it comes with are just not good, so you definitely want to dig out those old controllers along with your cartridges. In particular, the NES controller here has a very inconsistent D-pad in that the travel on the right-hand side is shallower than it is on the left-hand side. It really doesn't feel all that great to play. I was not too pleased with the SNES controller either. There's some sharp plastic bits here where the shoulder button is popping out of the back, and the D-pad doesn't feel all that great, and the buttons feel very squishy, and they don't stick up that far either, so it's hard to really feel your way around on the controller. So not good, but again, you can plug in your original controllers and have a decent experience with it. Your SNES games here go on the bottom row. The top row here is for the NES games, and then you flick the switch here to determine which system you wish to load. So if you flick it up to the NES, it would load up the Mario Duck Hunt cartridge here to get us going. Now on the back, you have a couple of different connectivity options. You can connect it up to your HD television via HDMI. It outputs at 720p. I did find that the video quality on the NES was better than what I saw on the SNES. The SNES looked kind of dark and a little blurry. The NES looked a little sharper to me. You can see some footage that I'm overlaying right now, so just bear that in mind. You're not going to get the best quality video out of the SNES side of this. It also has a composite option, so if you do have an old tube TV kicking around and don't have the original console, you can hook it up with the composite connectors in the back here. However, I was not able to get my zapper light gun to work when I did have it plugged into a CRT television. This has been an issue I've seen with a number of these clone consoles. This one was no exception to that, although I did see better video quality out of composite when connected up to an old tube TV. Over here is power. It just runs off of USB voltage, so pretty simple to get up and running. In fact, many TVs might be able to power this thing without having to use its included AC adapter at all. This switch here is pretty cool, which we'll explore in a minute, because you can, on the fly, switch between a 16:9 ratio or a 4:3 ratio for the image. And of course, these old games ran on standard definition TVs, which were mostly square, so you can get that square image or have it stretch out to the full width of your display if you want. So you've got that as an option. And then on the bottom here, you have a switch between NTSC and PAL. So if you are running in a PAL region, you can just flick it over to PAL to get the proper frame rate for your games. So if you are in one region and the game seems like it's running a little slow, check that switch on the bottom to make sure you have it in the region for your particular market. So that is the overall hardware. Let's take a look now and see how the games play on it. All right, so let's take a look first at its NES capabilities, and we've got Super Mario Brothers running here. What's cool is that you can plug in the SNES controller and actually run the game with that newer controller. So the controller ports here will work on either system, which is pretty handy, so you don't have to keep flopping controllers back and forth, and you're able to play things here as you can see on the screen. Now what's cool is that I can also hit that switch in the back, so let's switch over to our full-up view here, and you can see right now we've got it in that square mode, but if I flick the switch in the back here now, you'll see that it automatically widens itself out without having to reboot. There was another clone console we looked at from Hyperkin called the Retron 1, which allowed you to do this, but you had to reset the console first. This one lets you do it on the fly, so I can pause here and just flick it back and get that other view there. And as you can see, it looks pretty sharp here on the NES. I don't know how accurate the color is compared to the original, but I think for a lot of folks who are just looking to revisit some old games of theirs, it'll look pretty close to the original, nice and bright, pretty sharp here as well. But let's shift gears now and load up an SNES game. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go back over here to the console and flick on the SNES switch, and that will reset the console and now divert itself over to this other cartridge slot. And as you can see here, the game is loading up. So we'll take a look at Star Fox here and see how this plays. Now I'm finding, as you'll see here when I switch over to the Star Fox screen, that the SNES video quality is not as good. It's a little darker. It doesn't seem to have the same level of sharpness that I saw with the NES, but it is able to play some of the more advanced games like the Star Fox here, which uses that Super FX chip. It feels like it's running about the same as it did on the original. I'm a little bit hindered here in this review because I did not own a Super Nintendo back in the day, so these games are not as native to me perhaps as some of the 8-bit games were. So overall, though, it looks like it's playing okay, but again, the video quality isn't fantastic out of the HDMI on here. It is running pretty dark. Now for sound, the NES side of this suffers from the same issues we've seen with every other clone console we have looked at, in that it's not 100% accurate to the original. So take a listen here to Batman running on the Classiq 2 here. And now listen to what Batman sounds like on the original NES. So as you can hear, the sound isn't quite true to the original, but I think a lot of casual players really won't notice much of a difference there. Now on the SNES side, I did find the sound to be more accurate. However, it was a little more muffled and lower in its overall volume than it was on the original SNES. Due to copyright issues, I won't be able to post that music in this video, but I will put it up on my extras channel with some footage from a few games that I ran on it, so you can get a feel for exactly what the audio sounds like on it. But I did find the SNES audio was closer to the original than the NES audio was. Now, another thing we like to measure here on the channel is input lag. In other words, how long does it take for Mario to react to this button push? Normally, it's very hard to detect how much lag there is unless it's really noticeable, but what I do is record the screen at 240 frames per second with my iPhone and measure how long it takes for a button press to be reacted to on screen. Pretty simple stuff, and it's been working really well, actually. So this console on the NES side got a score of 92 milliseconds from the time that a button is pressed to the time something happens on screen. Compare that to 84 milliseconds on the Retron 1 HD, which is also another NES clone console. Now, it was interesting, though, when I tested out the SNES side of this console, we got a lower score. In other words, it's not doing as well in SNES as it is on the NES. So the SNES mode here got a score of 120 milliseconds. Really quite slow. In fact, the slowest I have tested here on the channel. So you will see a good amount of input lag on the SNES, and I would say at 120 milliseconds, it's probably noticeable too. So all in, this console does kind of do what it sets out to do, which is running both the Super Nintendo and the original Nintendo games on a single console with a flip of the switch. It's pretty cool how you can just do that and get the other console up and running with an original cartridge very quickly. There are some issues, though. The input lag isn't terrific on this, and in fact, on the SNES side of the equation, it's downright terrible. The controllers it comes with are equally terrible, so I do recommend looking for your old SNES and NES controllers that might be in the closet with your old games. And I think for a casual player, this is probably fine, but if you are an enthusiast, this is not going to be fine for you. But I think if you've got somebody in your life who has a bunch of these cartridges kicking around and no way to play them, this might breathe some new life into those old games. So that's a pretty nice little gift you might be able to give for the holidays. Now, like many of these clone consoles, it does tend to have a vice grip on your cartridges. It's not as bad on the NES side as it is on the SNES side. You really have to give it a hard tug to get these cartridges out, and that makes me a bit nervous for what it might do to the cartridges in the long run. This is an issue we've seen on a bunch of these other clone consoles. They tend to grip those cartridges really, really tightly, and that does make me a little bit nervous. Also, make sure, of course, that your cartridges are thoroughly cleaned before they go in here, because it's very sensitive to dirty cartridges, as we found in our testing. So all in, not bad. I'm not sure if it's worth the $70 price tag. I think it might have been better, maybe around 50 bucks without any controllers, and you can bring your own. But all in, it does again set out what it accomplishes to do. So that's going to do it for the Classiq 2 HD, and this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching, and check out my extras channel to see some footage from this device that we captured earlier this week.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast, Chris Allegretta, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.